well-respected man in the community, a husband, a leader, a Christian leader, and he built this trust in my mind. And so I told him I struggle with homosexuality, with same-sex attraction. And then shared that with him. It became apparent to me that then he was making a sexual advance on me and had been setting me up this whole time. And I felt so disgusted. And I felt so used, felt so betrayed.
Both of them are being lured in by the enemy into something that's a very contrary kind of life, with the goal of the enemy to ultimately rob them of everything, if he can, to rob them of life entirely, or at least get them bound up so that they wind up spinning their wheels for decades of time and maybe going into the grave again, unaccomplished in any way that is meaningful, but coming to a place of resolution and acceptance that the Lord truly is on the throne. He is in control, and he can actually turn this, as I'm listening to you, like he's prompted within you a heart to mind this in a way that gives him great glory, in a way that gives other people hope.
And so she has said, we're going to do something simple. We're going to make it like Christmas. We want you to take out those hidden things in your heart, put them in your hands and raise your hands. First time I ever lifted my hands in worship to the Lord. Because she was saying, it doesn't matter what it is, God can handle it. He took it all on the cross. But have you ever given it to him? So I remember just doing this. She said, now on Christmas, you don't just give things back, but you receive things in return. Well, I gave my sin to Jesus, and he gave me a brand new identity.
Welcome to the Love and Truth Network podcast, your guide for hope and healing in a hurting world searching for truth. Here we explore God's extraordinary design for biblical sexuality, identity, and authentic community. You'll be impacted by incredible stories of transformation, practical wisdom from pastors and counselors, and the power of God's grace that changes lives.
Well, hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Love and Truth Network podcast. We're so glad that you're here with us. And today is going to be a really special treat. I have known our guest for many, many years and have been blessed by his ministry over and over and over again. I'll talk a little bit about that. But Dennis Jernigan is here with us. And for those of you who are pretty young, you might not necessarily pick up the relevance of his name right off the bat, but he's just been so huge and instrumental in the whole worship space, and the songs that he's written and the music that he's played. Amazing pianist, and I'm not sure of other instruments, but we'll get into some of that. But I'm so grateful, Dennis, that you joined us today for this episode. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Gary. It's been a long while since I've gotten to do this, so this is going to be fun.
That's good. It's good. It is going to be fun. So one of the things, as I think back, Dennis, I remember it's funny how certain events will happen in our lives and we remember exactly where we were. I was going through a really tough situation. I was living in Houston, Texas many years ago now. I just turned 60. I was in my late 20s. And I was going through a really, really hard time relationally, and just even in my relationship with God, there was some kind of new birth of commitment to him and those kinds of things. I was in a Christian bookstore in the area, and I was checking out, and I saw this image, the sign that had been posted about a concert that was coming up, and you were the one doing it. And it said something on the poster about Dennis is going to be sharing his story of coming out of homosexuality and that kind of thing, or something like that. And honestly, I had never seen anything like that in my life. I sat there, I'm checking out, and I'm staring at this poster, and your concert was coming up, and I thought, there's no way that I can miss this. I've never heard anybody talk about the stuff that I've struggled with in an open forum like that before. And so I, jotted down the dates and the time, and I was there that night and just got to take in, along with, so many within that church, huge church, of your incredible leading us in worship, but also kind of sharing your story throughout that time. So that was a huge and important point in my own journey. And I'm just so grateful for the way the Lord has used you in my life, but also just countless people in showing who he is, that his power does not stop at the threshold of the LGBT world to bring people out of darkness into light.
That's right. Part of the reason I even shared publicly for so long is just for that very reason you just said. I remember being a little boy struggling with same-sex attraction, hoping somebody would tell me that I wasn't going to hell, that there was hope, and nobody ever did.
Yes.
So when the Lord set me free, it took me 7 years from the point of my deliverance to the point where I felt comfortable enough to share publicly about what God had taken me out of. So I just didn't want to be, I just wanted to be a voice to those like you just described yourself as being.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. It makes total sense. And I was just in another podcast a little bit earlier today, and I was just talking about how, as a little kid that grew up in the church at 5 or 6 years of age, experienced sexual abuse and then early sexualization through pornography, hardcore porn by older neighborhood boys and those kinds of things. I just wrestling and struggling with shame. Again, growing up in a Christian family, but feeling no sense of ability to talk with my parents about this. I mean, I finally said something about it to my mom, and the solution, I mean, my mom and dad loved me and cared about me, but they had no idea what to do about what had happened to me. And they just said, well, you can't play with those boys anymore, as if that kind of solved the whole thing. There were lots of other gaps between me and my dad, et cetera, and over-identification with my mom and my sister, and lack of connection with my older brothers, and kind of boys in general at school and church and all of that. But there are a lot of facets to how this kind of developed within me. But the sexualization was obviously a huge part of that, and their sexual behavior, these older boys. But in thinking through that, though, I just said to somebody recently, earlier today, that I had wished, just like you verbalized, Dennis, I had so longed growing up in church. I felt like I was this uniquely broken freak. I felt like there's nobody else that struggles with anything sexual. I mean, we never talked about it in church. It must just be me. And yet, as an adult, I look back and I had conversations with people that I kind of grew up around in church and realized, my goodness, of course, naturally, everybody was struggling, or many people were struggling with these issues, and yet we were never talking about it. And so you grow up in church, or I grew up in a church that, because they were never talked about, it was such a taboo topic, sexuality in general, that you're just kind of left to yourself to sort of figure it out and feel like, no, I'm uniquely broken. And so in the church, we're actually giving the enemy ground by our silence around these issues. We're creating a void in very core areas of people's lives for the enemy to step in, the world to step in and provide so-called solutions that are mere counterfeits of what God really created us for. So anyway, I'm so grateful that you were telling your story, that I got to connect with that. And I'd love for you to share with our audience just your story, God's story in your own life.
Sure. And let me preface it with this. In 2019, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's. So it's going to be difficult for me to say a few things sometimes. So please bear with me. I
Absolutely
went through deep brain stimulation surgery in August. So I'm a little slow in speaking. I paid somebody to give me a traumatic brain injury is what I did. And
yes.
So I'm doing okay. I'm doing great. There's no more tremor. I tremored for 6.5 years. I say all that to say that I just want your people to understand that that's the reason why I may appear to be a little slower than normal. But I remember being 5 years old, and the first time I was approached sexually by an adult male was in a public restroom, and he exposed himself to me and wanted me to touch him, and I wouldn't do it, and I ran, and I remembered I'm going to go tell my mom what just happened. And I stopped short of telling my mom because this other voice came into my head saying things like this: why would that man think he could do that to you? What about you says that you would like that? And so I didn't tell my mom, and I just stopped short of telling anyone else. And that's where it just really got ingrained in my heart and my mind. my mind is the battlefield. And God's word tells us that as a man thinks in his heart, so he is. So the enemy got his claws in my mind at a very early age. And then I remember you mentioned church and how church responded. I remember in either the late 60s or early 70s, All in the Family did an episode on Archie Bunker's friend being gay. And I remember the men of my church, every Sunday morning, they would gather outside by the church steps. And me and my brothers and cousins would be jumping off the church steps. And I was listening the whole while, especially when the term homosexual or fag or whatever came up. And I thought, they're talking about me. They just don't know they're talking about me. And when I heard them describe what they thought of someone like me, I thought, that's what God thinks of me. These are the men who teach me about God. These are the men I respect. These are the men who show me how to do so many things as a man. If this is what they think, and they know God the way they do, therefore God must hate me. So I went through the rest of my childhood just performing. I became a very good basketball player. I started on our state basketball team all 4 years of high school. I excelled at piano, and I knew the hymn book by memory. I couldn't read a lick of music, but I could just hear it and sit down and play it. And then I get to college, and I discover there are other guys like me who are dealing with the same things, and we sort of gravitate together. And that's a remedy for destruction right there. And that's all I'll say about that. But I remember somebody handing me an album by the group Second Chapter of Acts. And do you want me to listen to hippie music? Because that's what they were. They were hippies. And I said, okay, I'll listen to it. And as I listened to it, I was just blown away by their lyrics and the fact that they wanted to know God so intimately. And that's how I wanted to know God. And then 1978, that was 1977, 1978, Keith Green came through our campus and gave a concert. Keith Green was very instrumental because you were with him 5 minutes, you knew you needed Jesus. That's the way he was.
Yes, that's so true.
And so I thought, I want to play the piano like that guy. I want to write lyrics like Annie Herring, and I want to reach the world. But there's no hope for me. Then along came my senior year, and I knew life was going to hit me square in the face, and I was not prepared. And I remember walking across campus one day, wondering what I'm going to do, and I hear this voice call my name. And I turned around, and it was a well-respected man in the community, a husband, a leader, a Christian leader. And just, I thought, how in the world would you even know my name? And so he began asking me how I could help with my studies. He would take me out for a Coke, and I would just talk to him about my troubles. And he built this trust in my mind. And so there came a night when I went to him and I said, there's something that I'm going to tell you, but I need to know if you're going to love me no matter what. He said, I will love you no matter what. There's nothing you can tell me that would keep me from loving you. And so I told him I struggle with homosexuality, with same-sex attraction. And then it felt like the weight of the world lifted off my shoulders because I'd finally told someone. God's word says in John 8:32, you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. The first step towards truth is always our own honest confession. And as I shared that with him, it became apparent to me that then he was making a sexual advance on me and had been setting me up this whole time.
Oh.
And I felt so disgusted, and I felt so used, I felt so betrayed. And I lived by myself at the time, as the enemy would have it, because he wants to separate the wounded sheep from the rest of the herd so he can have all his time on them. And that's where I was. I lived by myself, so I went to my little apartment after this encounter, feeling used and betrayed and just disgusted with myself. And I had a little gas heating stove, and I remember turning on the flame, or turning on the stove but not lighting the flame, because I'm going to check out. I couldn't do this anymore. I laid there on the floor for several minutes just waiting to die. And this little voice popped into my head. Do you really know what waits for you out there? Are you really prepared for eternity? And I could not answer those questions, and that scared me more. So I get up and turn off the stove, and I decide this is just the way I was born. This is just the way it's going to be. And I lived the rest of that year, that was 1981, from my graduation until the end of that summer, living that life, thinking this is just who I am. And then it gets even more bizarre from there, because I decided God didn't meet me at Oklahoma Baptist University where I went to school. He'll surely meet me at seminary. I'll go on to seminary. I've already tried suicide. I might as well try seminary. And because in my mind, how could one be worse than the other? So
Yep.
I 3 days before I was to go to seminary, a friend called me who had graduated a year before me. And he said, Dennis, God's been speaking to me about you. That scared me to death, because I thought, God doesn't speak to me about me, so what the heck is he saying to you? He said, God came to me in a dream, and in this dream, God was giving you all kinds of music and all kinds of songs, and people all over the world are singing your songs. And I thought, I'd only written 3 songs to that point, because when I was at OBU, I went to the head of the theory and composition department and said I wanted to declare my major as a songwriter. And they said, we're sorry, Mr. Jernigan, we have only so many openings in that area, and it's for people we see promise in. We just don't see that promise in you.
Oh,
And they wouldn't
wow.
let me. That's a true story. That's not an indictment on anybody. It's just part of my story. And anyway, this guy was telling me all this stuff. He said, to confirm it to you that this is really the Lord, my mom had the same dream this week, and we would like to know if you would like to move to Oklahoma City and live with us and give God a chance to work this in your life.
Wow.
So I get to Oklahoma City, and I had my church music degree, and I figured I'd find a job quickly at a church somewhere. But that wasn't God's plan. The only job I could find was driving a school bus. I had an early morning route and an afternoon route, and I had hours in the day where I'm literally losing my mind, because here's homosexuality calling for me. Here's my friend telling me every day, this is the thing the Lord is calling you to. And so there came a point where I would just take my Bible after my morning routes and open it up to Psalm 1 and begin singing through the Psalms, making melody in my heart to the Lord, just to save my own sanity. Because I figured David committed adultery, David committed a murder. David was considered a man after God's own heart, though. And I thought, he's in my league of sin, so I can relate to him. So I would begin to sing through the Psalms. I've literally sung through the Psalms many times. And then I began to write my own songs, and we began to sing them, me and this friend who had had the dream and another friend in a trio. And then there came a night where my friend confronted me. He said, Dennis, I know what you're hiding. And I said, I'm not hiding anything. And he said, yes, you are. You're hiding homosexuality. And I remember freaking out so badly that I got up from the room. I ran out of the door, and I'm just running into the night. And it's one of those, it would make a great movie scene where you're running and running. And then you come to the realization, where am I running to? And I just stop right in the middle of the street in Del City, Oklahoma. And I say, Lord, if you're real, I need to hear from you now. And believe it or not, I looked up in the sky. It was just a moonlit night. There was a couple of clouds in the air, but it was very bright. And these two clouds were there. One was in the image of an old man. The other was an image of a little lamb. Pretty soon they combined. The old man cloud just enveloped and embraced the little lamb cloud. And I knew that I thought to myself, did I just see what I think I saw? And it was like the Lord was saying, that's me, son. That's what I want to do for you. So I went back to face my friend. I was going to pack because I figured he didn't want me to live with him anymore.
Mm.
And I said, I'll get my things and leave. He said, no, you don't have to do that. He said, I believe so much that God can heal you that I'm willing to walk through this with you, whatever it takes, however long it takes. I'll be with you
Mm.
as long as the Lord allows me to. And so that just set me on this road of discovery. And then right around that same time in November of 1981, it was November 7th, 1981, the band Second Chapter of Acts was going to be at the University of Oklahoma. And I got there early enough so no one could see me sneak in my tape recorder with 3 blank cassette tapes because I'm going to get a 3-album set that night. I just did not
Yep.
know I was going to get to record my own deliverance. And I get to listen to it every year. I
Wow.
save it that day. But what happened that night at the concert was Annie Herring is the lead singer. She's the most prolific songwriter of the group. They're no longer together, but that's the way it was then. And they were singing this concert, and then all of a sudden they just stop. And Annie Herring said, God's told me to tell somebody here tonight that you've got things hidden in your heart that you would be devastated if you thought anyone knew about. But God wants me to tell you that he sees those things and he loves you anyway, right where you are. He doesn't want to leave you there. He wants to bring you with him. And so she has said, we're going to do something simple. We're going to make it like Christmas. We want you to take out those hidden things in your heart, put them in your hands and raise your hands. First time I ever lifted my hands in worship to the Lord.
Mm.
Because she was saying, it doesn't matter what it is. God can handle it. He took it all on the cross. But have you ever given it to him? So I remember just doing this. She said, now on Christmas, you don't just give things back, but you receive things in return.
Mm.
Well, I gave my sin to Jesus and he gave me a brand new identity. And people ask me all the time, was your healing instant or has it been a process? And the answer is yes. It has been
right.
both. Because in an instant I was born again, I was given a brand new identity and I just embraced it wholeheartedly. And then I began to walk out what it means to find that way of escape that God says he will give us for every temptation. I discovered that night temptation defines no man. Temptation is just an opportunity to draw closer to Jesus. And that's what I've always used temptation for. Now it's hard for me to believe I was ever that way. There's been so much healing under that bridge for me.
Mm.
And so I lived the rest of 1981 through 1983, just getting healing and more healing, putting off the lies, putting on the truth. I called it stinking thinking. I'd put off the stinking thinking, put on the right thinking. And my friend has stuck with me to this day that had that dream and made that promise to me that whatever it took, no matter how long it took, I'll be with you. And he has been faithful to do that for me. Then I'd had a dream of being married and having a family, but I didn't think it was possible. And the Lord said, have you asked me? And I said, okay, Lord, I would like to be married. That's one of the desires of my heart. You say, if I delight myself in you, you'll give me the desires of my heart. So I began to delight in the Lord, and that's when all this worship music began to pour out of me. And I have to attribute so much of my musical writing to that period of my life. But what happened was I said, Lord, if you want me to be married, would you speak through my parents? So I go home from my brother's wedding. This has been about 3 weeks later. And I'm sitting there talking with my parents. And they said, we always thought you'd be the first one to be married. And I said, well, who do you think I should have married? Because I had dated off and on through college, just to put up a front for people. But
Yeah.
I made this discovery that I fell in love with Melinda, but I could not see putting her through that life with me of having to deal with that. So I cut it off completely with her. And then here's my parents telling me, we felt like Melinda was the one for you. And that scared me to death. So I said, Lord, you spoke through my parents. Now would you speak through her parents? Because I didn't have enough faith to believe that God would speak to me that way. But
This is like a Gideon,
exactly,
making the fleece wet, and then, well, make the fleece dry and make everything else wet around it, right?
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So I wrote her mom a letter, and her mom recognized my handwriting and opened it right away and read it. And she got Melinda on the phone. This is the days before cell phones, of course. We've been married 42 years now. But
Wow.
she read the letter to Melinda, and in the letter I said, I have nothing but good intentions for your daughter, and I will not date her without your permission, but I'm dating her with the vision of marrying her. I think she is the one for me. And her mom wrote me back and said, yes, you have my permission. Here's her number. So I called her. We were engaged a month later. I still had not told her what I was struggling with, though, because I'd received counsel from friends and pastors I trusted. They said this because you could tell they just didn't really know how to deal with the issue,
Right.
and they just didn't. And so, where was I going with that?
Just that her mom had given you permission, but at this point you got engaged a month later after you started connecting with Melinda
Oh, yeah,
again.
I know what I was going to say. They said, don't tell Melinda what you're struggling with. Nobody needs to know because
Mm.
God's removed it as far as the east is from the west. He's forgotten about it. So should you. That rubbed me the wrong way for so many years. It was 2 years into our marriage before I told Melinda what my struggle was. And
Mm.
she said to me, is that all? And I couldn't believe she said that. She said, now I get to tell you the things that I've been hiding. And we both had things that we were devastated by that we helped each other through in that process.
Yes.
Then there came a day in 1998.
Well, let me just pause there for a second, Dennis, and I think you would agree with this now, but I often like the advice that you got. I understand it, and I understand why people were saying that because they didn't really know what to do, but. And the Lord is merciful in your situation and with Melinda sharing back with you. But of course, when people approach me now and ask that question of I'm interested in this young woman and yet here's my background or vice versa, what do I do? Of course, I'm always saying, hey, maybe the moment isn't right now, but you do need to talk with this person and reveal everything before they say I do. Like they need to know it's right that they get to wrestle with this before committing their life to you. And also it's going to go, in most cases, it's going to go better for you if that's the case. And they have the full opportunity to say, yes, I believe that the life change in you is genuine, that God is at work in your life. And even with this being part of your history, I want to be married to you. I mean, that is the ideal situation. And I think the situation that we should lean into. There's always those opportunities where we might not have done something right, but God is merciful in the middle of it. But anyway, and I'm sure that these people that were advising you, of course, had the best intentions, but here to me, that's taking the scriptures and using it, God doesn't remember, he's forgotten it. Well, but that doesn't mean that you still don't need to bring it up to this person who's potentially committing the rest of their life to you.
I advise people the same way. I still say you need to let them know they deserve to know, because
Yep.
you're going to be one flesh and you need to know the other person completely. At least that's our
Yes.
goal.
Right.
And anyway, I went into my marriage 2 years later, told Melinda she was fine with that. I thought we had a great intimate marriage, but the veil was torn between us, and talk about intimacy in every way. It just went off the chart because we had nothing hidden from one another. And that's the way
Yes.
I love it. I love to live my life that way. And there came a place in 1998 where I was on staff of a church in Oklahoma City, where at first I started out as secretary, and then I became janitor. And then one Sunday morning, the worship pastor said, I wasn't even leading worship or anything. I was just playing the piano sometimes and playing my violin. And one Sunday morning before worship, the worship pastor gets up and says, I've been standing in somebody else's position and they can't take their rightful place in it until I step down. This was right before the
Wow.
service was going to begin. He said, the Lord's told me who that person is, and he's here right now, and his name's Dennis Jernigan. And I went, what? And the
My gosh, that's incredible.
pastor steps up and says, the Lord's told me the same thing, and you're supposed to start today. And I get up there and I do this number, leading people how I was taught in college, and it did not work for me. And I went to the pastor immediately afterwards and I said, if you're going to have me lead worship, you're going to need to let me sit at the piano and lead from there, where I can flow from song to song. And that's how my worship ministry actually began. And in a 10-year period between, we were married in 1983. We had our first child in 1994, 1984. Oh my Lord. It's been a long time. And
Yeah.
we have 13 grandchildren now. But
It's amazing.
where was I going with that? I'm having a Parkinson's moment now. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're doing great, Dennis. You're talking about just how you were ushered into. I had never heard that story about how you were ushered into becoming a worship leader. That's amazing to me. I'm just curious as you share that. We both grew up in a similar denomination, and that would be very rare for a person to be that sensitive to the voice of the Spirit that they would interrupt a service like that and do anything major. I'm just curious, was that a non-denominational church that you were in at that time, or a church that was open to the gifts of the Spirit?
It was a Baptist church, but I called this Baptist-costal.
Okay, I had one of those too. I didn't grow up in one, but that was the church that really rescued my life. The pastor would often refer to his church as Baptist-costal, and that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and then my job description all of a sudden became sit before the Lord and ask if there are any new songs for the body of Christ.
Wow.
And I hear from people all the time now, even though I haven't publicly ministered in over 7 years, just because of the Parkinson's.
Yeah.
But I hear from people all the time who the music has become new to. And so we keep it available all the time.
That's great.
Because people hear my story.
Would you just... Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when they hear my story, I've written the history of each song. So I try to post that with the song, because by the time they read the story of the song, which is usually just a paragraph long, they're already in love with the song because they identify with it in some way or another. I'm sorry, you go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, that's great. I love that, Dennis. I'm just wondering, for some people are going to quickly recognize your name, and many, especially younger people, may not as much. What are some of the 5, 6, whatever top songs that You Are My All in All, I think is that the title of it, or is that just a line in that one?
All in all, that's the number one song on my list that people. In fact, I got a video from a young mother last night who was teaching it to her 4 and 5-year-old. They were singing it at the top of their lungs. I don't even know where they were from, but I hear from people literally all over the world who have heard that song sung in Israel, in Hebrew, in Arabic, in Korean. The Koreans love that song for some reason. But another one is We Will Worship the Lamb of Glory. Another one that became repopularized during COVID was Who Can Satisfy My Soul? And let's see, another one would be If I Could Just Sit With You a While is a big one for me. And Great is the Lord Almighty, I Belong to Jesus. People still use those in youth leadership positions.
Yeah.
Which blows my mind.
How many albums or CDs have you actually produced?
Somewhere between 30 and 40. I've never really stopped to count.
That's
and what we're doing
amazing.
now is because of the Parkinson's. I've lost most of my vocal ability. I still write, but through the years, with every album I recorded, there were probably 10 or 15 more songs that I had made demos of. So we're releasing a new album each year. I could die tomorrow and Melinda could still keep releasing albums for 15 to 20 more years of
That's
just
amazing.
10 songs at a time. So we've got one coming out this summer called Honesty, which is one of my favorite albums I've ever had the opportunity to produce. And it's just taking demos or live moments from YouTube and putting them in the digital world. And so that's one of the things we're doing. And I'm also
That's so great. Go ahead.
I'm also writing books on Parkinson's because Parkinson's is not a death sentence. It just gives me a new opportunity to approach the Lord in a different way. And all creativity is seeing life from the Lord's point of view or from a different point of view. And the first book I wrote became number one on Amazon for the entire month of April. The number one new release is called Parkinson's and Recreation, One Man's Journey Through Parkinson's So Far. And the other one is called Parkinson's and Recreation 2, No Walk in the Parkinson's. And then I've got one coming out this October called Parkinson's and Recreation 3, The No Parkinson's Zone. And each one is taking a different aspect of Parkinson's and seeing it from the Lord's point of view, because either Romans 8:28 is true or it's not. We know that God causes all things to work together for our good to those who love him and who are called according to his purpose.
Yes.
I love him. I'm called according to his purpose. So he's allowed Parkinson's for a reason, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to go down with that ship. I'm going to go down and fight and using it for the kingdom.
Yep. That's amazing. I love that, Dennis. And so many people need the kind of encouragement that you're putting out there around Parkinson's. And of course, I'm sure a lot of those, that book specifically for Parkinson's does apply to many, many life-altering situations outside of Parkinson's naturally.
Very much so. I hear from people with all manner of illnesses who have never thought to give thanks for it, or even, which sounds crazy that I would give thanks for it, but I would not have the perspective I have now had I not been diagnosed with Parkinson's. And I know that sounds crazy to people, but I am grateful. I'm not necessarily grateful for it all the time, but I am grateful that God is with me through it. And I'm writing stories for my grandchildren now in the fantasy genre because I want my grandchildren to know Jesus And fantasy is one of the best ways I've found to introduce it to them in ways they can't
Yes.
forget. One of
That's
my
so
favorite
good.
is a series called The Bairns of Bryn, and it's Bairns, The Bairns of Bryn. I've written 4 books so far. The first book is called Hide and Seek. The second book is called The Light Eater. The third book is called The Puzzle. And the interesting thing about The Puzzle is that the main character in that book is named Sepalio Parkinson. And he has cast a spell on the kid's granddad. I'm the old king in the, and their quest is to help me to battle Parkinson's. And it's practical
Okay.
ways how to do that. The one coming out on April 1st is called Winifred and the Watcher in the Woods. And it's how to teach my children to be caregivers. And because their grandfather, me once again, has a spell had a spell cast on him that makes him believe he's a burden to his family. And that is a lie straight from the pit of hell, because this is an opportunity for my family to come together. And that's what we're seeing happen is, in fact, when I was first diagnosed with Parkinson's, I was scared to death of what my grandchildren would think because I tremored all the time. I was just always doing this, and my
Yeah.
face would shake and I couldn't even smile. Still difficult for me to smile, but I'm smiling on the inside, even if it doesn't look like I'm
Yeah.
smiling on the inside.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
so one of the things we did was we would say, okay, that hand that's shaking so much, that's Grandpa's party hand. That means he loves you so much that his hand shakes. So they would fight over, oh, Grandpa's party hand. And now at mealtime, since I don't tremor anymore, they'll all start tremoring their hands just to remind me they're with me. And I love that.
Yes.
It's so cool.
Yeah. That is, well, what a remarkable, in a sense, shift of a journey. I mean, it's a continuation of the journey of dependency on the Lord that you've been on for all of these years, but in a different way, and in a way that impacts a whole other kind of audience, right? And
Right.
as you're talking about all the content that's still available that Melinda can produce, that you can produce, I'm just reminded even of, regardless of how people feel about TPUSA and Charlie Kirk and all of that. I mean, the truth is he had so much teaching and all kinds of stuff that has not yet even been kind of mass produced, that for years and years and years, decades probably of time, the messages that he had can still, the best of them can still go out, and I think that's an amazing legacy or opportunity that we have with the kind of technology that we have now and recordings and all of that. I mean, that's just incredible. And there was that piece, but then also when you were talking about being thankful for the Parkinson's, not always thankful in every moment for the disease itself, but certainly the outcome of it. And I think even I'm just reminded of Amy Carmichael, the missionary who wound up injured and in a lot of pain for many, many years of her life. But her most prolific writing was in that situation of being, is my understanding, bedridden. And Elizabeth Elliot has written a book about her, and there's many people that have written about her, and she's written her own books. But there was so much that came out, and probably some of the most important work that is still remembered and read today extends from her time when she was bedridden and, again, in a lot of pain, but was able to produce so much content from that. So yeah, it is. We never want to be in any way dismissive, but I think what you're talking about, Dennis, and again, I'd love for you just to speak to this again, is for the Christian to be able to come to a place of genuinely working through the grief, the shock, the total shift in dreams and goals down the road, and the way that we imagined life to kind of go. And now it's all been turned on its head, or at least feels like it has been in so many ways. But going through that cycle of grief and shock and anger, whatever, but coming to a place of resolution and acceptance that the Lord truly is on the throne. He is in control, and he can actually turn this, as I'm listening to you, like he's prompted within you a heart to mind this in a way that gives him great glory, in a way that gives other people hope.
Sure. And I specifically had to go through all the stages of grief. When I was first diagnosed with Parkinson's, I was in major denial for quite a while. And then I came to the point where I accepted it. And that's when God began to take a hold of my life in a brand new way. And that's when I got the idea of writing these books. And I don't know if you've ever seen the show Parks and Rec. It's a comedy. It's very profane a lot of the time, but I knew the world would recognize that title. So that's why I titled my books Parkinson's and Recreation. One man's journey through Parkinson's so far, because I've had so many people who have picked up the book thinking it's going to be a secular book, and they're hit with Jesus.
It's so great.
I love that.
Yep.
I love that. So I've kept with that theme, Parkinson's and Recreation, No Walk in the Parkinsons, which is funny to think about. And then the third one that's coming out this October, the No Parkinson's Zone. Because I think there are certain places we cannot afford to park our minds. We cannot afford to park our mind in the place of self-pity, or in the place of grumbling and complaining, or in the place of panic or anxiety. There's help for us out there. And I'm talking about godly, Christian, wise counselors who can help people through anything. Because as I said at the beginning, as a man thinks in his heart, so he is. We've discovered through the years now, science has discovered, which I think is so cool of God to do this. We wonder all about, a lot of people worship science, but who do we think made science? Well, God did. The heart has brain-like matter on its coating, and it helps organize the conversation between organs in the human body, so that as a man thinks in his heart, that's a real statement. It's a real reality. And that we can think with our heart as well as with our mind. When we put those two in sync, that's when we get the power of God in a whole way we didn't even understand possible in this life. So that's what I'm trying to do.
So good. So good. Dennis, I'm just wondering, I talk to a lot of people, I know you do too, to a lot of people who are in the kind of the beginning stages of maybe coming, well, two places. There's lots of places, but two that I'm thinking of is the young person or the teenager, the the young adult, the early 20s person who has been sexualized in some ways, whether through pornography or actual experiences with somebody else. And whether it is this desire as a boy or a young man toward a woman or toward same sex, to just be like, you know what, I know what the Bible teaches, and I've heard something about that, and I understand that God's not happy with us or whatever, but I just want to live my life now. The Christian life seems kind of boring, and I just want to live in the excitement of what I can have and kind of do in this dating scene or whatever, or hookup scene even. Or again, for those that are dealing with same-sex attraction, but are being so lured, both of them are being lured in by the enemy into something that's a very contrary kind of life, with the goal of the enemy to ultimately rob them of everything, if he can, to rob them of life entirely, or at least get them bound up so that they wind up spinning their wheels for decades of time and maybe going into the grave again, unaccomplished in any way that is meaningful in the kingdom. What would you say to someone like that, as well as the person who's also trying to wrestle with, okay, I realize this isn't what I signed up for. I realize this life is not gay, or it's not just fun. Hookup culture is destroying within. It's not leading me where I want to go. But yet, I don't know that Christianity really has anything to offer me. What would you say to those folks?
First of all, the first thing that comes to my mind is that I can't think of a more grand adventure than I've been on. I mean, think about this, being in the pits of hell, being at the lowest place if possible in my way of thinking about my life. And then all of a sudden, the Lord to be able to reach as far as I could fall, and then to say, let's go on this journey together. And that's how I've seen my life, as this grand adventure, this journey from my initial deliverance to my salvation to my healing. And all of that continues. It carries on.
Mm-hmm.
It'll carry on till the day I die. And so I would say to them, if you want a grand adventure, I can't think of anything more grand than seeing life from the Maker's point of view. And we've got to get to the point where we realize there is a Maker, there is a God, there is a Creator, there is a Savior, and that we all are in need of Him. And that's what I try to do with my life, and especially in this third book on Parkinson's. I point out the fact that God is real. Here's why it's important. And here's what Jesus means. And so if you want to live a grand adventure, it's not for sissies. It's not at all. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way at all. It's just, you want a grand adventure, I dare you to follow Jesus and see what He can do. And just because you feel a certain way, we're not defined by our feelings. In fact, we can change the way we think. And then if we change the way we think, we can change the way we feel. If we change the way we feel, we change the way we behave. And that's miraculous to me. And I love that aspect of my life, where I'll say something like this. I'll do something really stupid, and I'll say to myself, well, that, you stupid idiot. My wife says, is that who you are? Is that who your father says you are? And my children and grandchildren even call me out on that kind of thing now. Grandpa, that's not who you are. And so you've got to surround yourself with people who will help you along with this journey, because we're not in this alone. Right. And one of the best things I've ever done is cultivate friendships that are godly and healthy and life-giving and point me to Jesus. In fact, there was a point where I was grumbling and complaining so much. This has been about 20 years ago now, where I was grumbling and complaining to this friend that I was so sick and tired of this homosexual stigma that is attached to my life. And he said, pull in here real quick. And we were out in the middle of West Texas, and it was a cemetery. And I said, why do you want me to go to a cemetery? He said, I want you to pick out a tombstone, a gravestone. And I want you to bury the old Dennis there, leave him there, and I don't want to hear about this anymore, because I'm sick and tired of it. That really happened. And I'm always telling people, the old Dennis died, and I just decided to leave him in the grave. And so I would tell young people, for sure, seek Jesus, because it is in seeking Jesus that I've found my true freedom and true calling and true adventure. Life is not dull at all being a believer, especially in this day and age. It's a wondrous thing. And I can't believe I get to live this life that I live. And I have Parkinson's, and I can say that. So,
yeah, that's incredible, Dennis. And I mean, I just echo your words. I feel exactly the same. I'm just so astounded that God would take me from where I was, and that I even have life to begin with, but also that I get to be married to my wife, Melissa, that I get to be a father to my 2 boys. You've got 9 children. I have 2. I can't believe that, that the Lord has given such such grace and such mercy and such favor just by turning and becoming obedient, and it's amazing to me. And so I would just echo what you're saying. Something else that you reminded me of early on, you talked about your friend that stayed with you and stuck by your side and all these years. It reminded, and you said that he's still a good friend of yours. And it reminded me a few weeks ago, one of our pastors at the church that we attend, that we're members at, was talking about when he was 14, there were 5 or 6, I think he might have been the 6th one, that were sitting around, I think they were around a campfire, but there was an experience where these 14, 15-year-old boys were together and just had such a powerful experience with the Lord and with one another. And this was a building on what they were already cultivating. It wasn't some, out of the blue, but it was such a powerful experience of commitment to the Lord and commitment to one another. And he was just talking about the longevity of that commitment. And he showed a picture of today, and every single one of them still get together once a year. They get together as a group, however many, 50 some years later, and they're all serving the Lord, and they're all still committed to one another. I just thought, that's such a powerful, I just want to, again, emphasize what you're saying in terms of having the right people around us and making sure that we are a friend in return. And I love what you're highlighting, that biblical friendship is not always just this nice, comforting thing. Sometimes there's major challenge, like pull into the cemetery. I have something to say to you, and those are some of the best, faithful are the wounds of a friend, deceitful are the kisses of an enemy, right? Is what Proverbs says. So I love that perspective. And I think we definitely need, it's all throughout the scriptures that God created us for community. And we definitely need that community. I'm also wondering, Dennis, I have a couple other questions, but the leader that you mentioned who called your name on campus and then so sadly, it just breaks my heart to hear this. I hear it all the time, but where a Christian leader who should have been shepherding and caring for a younger individual that they're mentoring and coaching, instead it wound up being, at some point at least, shifting into some kind of grooming kind of thing. How long prior to, because I think it was right after you shared this deepest thing of your own heart, of your struggle, how long after that, how long before that had he been kind of what you understood to be discipling you? Had that been months, or had that been a year? Like, how long had that been going on for?
Several months by that time.
Okay. Yep. Well, and part of what's so devastating about that, and I had it's a different experience, but a similar experience of somebody that was at the Bible college that I was at, and he was a leader, and never in a million, he was a jock, he was engaged to be married. Never in a million years did I think that he would do anything with any other guy. And when I finally opened up and shared with him what I was wrestling with, and literally thinking we were going to pray for me, he wound up making advances, and that was just so shocking and so defiling that I want to emphasize this because Desert Stream Living Waters, Andrew Kaminsky, Melissa and I have been involved, had connected with them for the last 20 plus years. Love Andrew so much. And one of the things that he talked about that we were exposed to years and years ago was a teaching on leaders not feeding off the sheep, that making sure that as a leader, helping others, as a wounded healer, that we understand that we need accountability and that we need to be in the kind of relationships where we're being challenged to continue growing, to work out our own stuff, and that anything we're doing in terms of ministering to younger folks or even younger in the faith, that we are very careful to make sure that we're not being like, Achan, who took from what God had banned after Israel had overcome Jericho, and not taking from the things that God says, no, they're mine. And I just think we have to be so careful. We're living at a time where it seems like every other week or something, we're hearing about another major pastor or church leader or evangelist or whatever falling sexually. And we just need to make sure that we have the kind of accountability, the kind of friendships, the kind of church involvement and vulnerable relationships that are holding us not just accountable, but relationally connected, that we're getting our needs met in the way God designed us to. Because if we don't get our needs met the way God designed, the enemy is going to try to get in there, and often does, with his counterfeits.
Yeah. Melinda and I have been meeting in our home every Wednesday night with a group of people since the late 80s. We just continue that because we think that's so important and vital to our
Yes.
just the flow of life in our lives, and the flow of healing, and the flow of the Holy Spirit. And so a lot of times we'll just worship for a while, but then we'll always wind up, let's go around the room and do you have any problem? It's not necessarily me teaching or anything. It's just saying, what are your needs? How can we pray for you? And it's not a gossip session at all. We don't allow that.
Yes.
But accountability and the freedom to share our hurts, our heartaches, our wounds, our failures, our whatever. And it's like the Vegas saying, what happens in the Jernigan living room stays in the Jernigan living room.
That's right.
We want people to feel safe there.
So good. Well, you brought up a point I wanted to ask you about, which is exactly, I remember when you and I were talking over the phone back when we started our ministry about 12 years ago now. I think that's the last, well, we've had some communication since then, but that was the last kind of big conversation you and I had. And I remember you talking about the regular weekly meeting in your home, and that had been going on for some time. And, you know, I think it's so essential that we have those genuinely open and vulnerable kinds of gatherings together. I have a band of brothers I meet with regularly as well. And there's so much intentionality about not hiding in the shadows, but really bringing our shameful, challenging stuff forward to be prayed over, to be, to get confessed so that we can get back on track again. So anyway, I just think that's so essential. The last thing I think, Dennis, I wanted to ask you about, and I feel like we're living in a time, my audience will have heard me talk about this quite a few times before, but I feel like we're living in a time when, and have been for some time, that one of the greatest challenges and also greatest areas of need of our country, and I think many parts of the world, not all, but many parts of the world, is really the epidemic of fatherlessness. And that's true both in terms of fathers not being present in, or like they passed away, or through divorce, since we live in a divorce culture. Dads and moms are not in the same home together. Dads are not in the home with the children. Or in my case, my dad was there throughout my childhood and into my adulthood. My parents were married for 68 years. My dad passed away at 88. And I'm so grateful for that they stayed married. But even when dads are in the home, so often there's still kind of an atmosphere of fatherlessness because there's no real connection. You're a father of 5 kids. You come out of, obviously, I'm sure all adults now, but you come out of the similar background that I've come out of in terms of wrestling with same-sex attraction, et cetera. And yet God has done a kind of healing in my heart where, again, I'm overjoyed at being a father to my boys. I really try to shepherd their hearts and know them, pretty intimately. And there's even in their teenage years, there's a strong bond between us. We love each other very much. But I would love for you, Dennis, just to speak to that idea of the importance of fathers really shepherding the hearts of their children, modeling what it looks like to love their mom in a way that is sacrificial. None of us do it perfectly, to be sure, but what are your thoughts around that topic of being a father, obviously to your natural children, but I'm also overjoyed, and I know you have this too. You're a father, not just to your kids, but even by extension, a spiritual father to many. What are your thoughts around that topic?
Well, I think without a father, the family unit, of course, wouldn't exist. But I'm talking about spiritually. So my dad worked for me for the last 25 years of his life. And that was an amazing thing to me, how God took back that stolen ground that the enemy had taken from us. And even though there were so many times in my life when he wasn't emotionally present, or when he was emotionally overbearing or even hurtful at times, I don't mean to say bad things about my father, but I went back and asked the Lord to show me some of the good things from his point of view.
Yes.
And And one of the things he showed me was that when I was 5 years old, I was really into basketball, like I said earlier. And my dad asked me what I wanted for my birthday. I said, I want a basketball goal. And he said, well, we don't have enough money. We can't afford a basketball goal. But I do have enough money. I can buy a basketball goal seed, and we'll buy that and we'll plant it and we'll grow you a basketball goal. Bear with me here on this, because it's just a testament of how my dad loved me, and he just didn't know how to say it. But he came home one day and he was so happy that he had this seed that he had found he was able to buy. So we went out in the yard and he let me pick out a place where I wanted to put the basketball goal. And we planted this seed, and he said, now, son, it's your job to water this seed every day. And I was faithful to water this seed. And my birthday's in February, so it's not always easy and it's not always warm. It's very cold here in Oklahoma. But I was still watering that seed, sometimes twice a day. And you'd come to my farm, because my dad worked on a lot of vehicles, tractors, and other different machinery for farmers. And first thing I'd do is say, you got to come and see the basketball goal me and my dad are growing. And they'd look at my parents like, something's wrong with your son. He thinks you're growing a basketball goal. And they said, we are. So I went out a week later, and this 3-foot section of green pipe had sprouted during the night. And I started watering it even more. Another week went by, another 3-foot section of green pipe had developed. And it went on for several weeks until it got to the height where I knew my birthday was coming. So I remember going out in the morning, and it was just an amazing day. And I ran out in my underwear and my cowboy boots, because
That's great.
we were country folk. And I just remember it was like the earth stopped moving. The angels were surrounding. The Hallelujah chorus was playing, because like this giant flower that had blossomed was this basketball goal with a brand new rim and a white net and a brand new basketball sitting there. And how dare me say my dad did not love me when he laid down his life for me and me and my brothers. He just didn't know how to say it the same way. He was from a different generation. So we took back stolen ground, and I was able to put that even in a book form, and showed my dad on his deathbed all the illustrations from the book. I said, Dad, I love you. And he said back to me, I love you as well.
Yes.
But that became our norm. He never told me he loved me until after I was married for several years and started having grandbabies. And I thought, who is this man who's taking up my grandchildren or his grandchildren and throwing them in the air and loving on them, saying, I love you. And I'm like, where were you when I was growing up?
Exactly. Yeah.
And the Lord said to me, he was there. He just did not know how to say it. And I took my dad on a trip one time, Gary, and I said, Daddy, I want to ask you a lot of hard questions. He said, okay, shoot. And I went through a lot of different questions, but the big one I got to was, why did you never tell me you loved me when I was growing up? You know what he said to me? He said, my dad never told me, so I didn't know how to tell you. That's all I needed to hear. With that one question and one simple answer, we broke a generational curse in our family and took back so many years of stolen ground. And I used to love, after my dad and I had that moment, I would always hug him and say, I loved you. And he would still squirm a little bit, but he would say, I love you. We love you. He would always use my mom's name in it too. Me and your mom love you too, which I thought was hilarious. But my point is, sometimes our perspective is a little skewed as well. And the enemy loves to skew our perspective. My dad loved me. He just didn't know how to say it the same way that I expected it to be.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that makes sense or helps at all, but
Oh, I think it makes a lot of sense. And, I had to come to that place of recognizing the same thing that you're talking about, that my father really did love me. And there were some big disconnects. And the truth is, when I was a teenager, I was not lovable. I mean, I was dealing with so much shame and so much self-hatred, and then all that was getting turned outward. And I was rejecting. I mean, we talk about defensive detachment in counseling circles, and especially around same-sex attraction, LGBT issues. And I certainly was practicing that toward my father. And when I look back on how I was toward him, it's no wonder, that it was a real challenge, frankly, for him to show a lot of love for me. But we resolved so much later on, and to be able to have spent the last more than 10 years of his life in probably 15 or 20 even of really close relationship and continuing growing relationship with him. I'm so grateful for my dad, and I'm so grateful, for who he was. And also friends of mine, a friend of mine in particular that got to be around my parents in their older years and would see them kind of from year to year, had commented, "Your parents are so amazing, because I feel like no matter how old they are, they still are teachable. They're still longing to grow." And that says a lot. And it's true that that's who they were. So I think so often we live in especially now in such a cancel culture, that there's more and more and more, especially around politics and all this stuff kind of going on, where kids, adult children, are just cutting off their parents and done. Like there's no communication, there's no nothing, don't even want communication anymore. And the tragedy of that is that it's tragic all the way around, but it's not just the parents that are being cut off and missing that, it's that the children are missing all the good that their parents actually have for them. So anyhow, I do think that fathering is so essential. Mothering obviously is as well, of equal value and so important. But fathering has often kind of been downplayed as in value, and yet it really is essential.
here's a great example from my own life. My daughters would come on a Sunday morning with their spin-around dresses when they were 4 and 5 years old, and they'd go up to their mom and say, "Mom, how do I look?" And she'd say, "Oh, you look beautiful." But when they believed it? When they came up to
Yes.
me and Daddy said,
Yep.
"You look beautiful." Fathers
Yep.
bestow identity on their children. They bestow grace.
I
They
agree.
bestow blessing. And so that's what's missing. That's what breaks my heart with children cutting off their parents in the name of boundaries. That crushes me, and I don't
Yes.
understand it. So I've written even in my new book about that, about what my thoughts are on that issue as well.
Well, Dennis, how can people find your books? Are they on Amazon? And then also, what's the best way for them to kind of follow? I don't know if you have a website or other ways of people to stay connected with you.
They can go to DennisJernigan.com, or they can go to patreon.com/Dennis Jernigan. And that helps support my podcast and other things I try to keep going. And then all my books are available on Amazon.
Okay.
And if you have trouble, just call my office and we can figure out how to get you the books.
Okay. That's great. And they can get to your number is listed on the website.
It's 918-781-1200. And they can get all my music, of course, on all major streaming services. Just look up Dennis Jernigan.
Yeah, if you want some powerful music, folks listening or viewing this podcast, some powerful music to really connect you with the heart of God, I hope that just from Dennis's sharing and what he's gone through as a boy, as a young man, now has lived a long life, the songs and both in terms of the musical quality, but also the lyrics are so powerful in helping us connect with God, helping us understand who God is and how much He does love us. Dennis, I'm so grateful for you and for your life and your faithfulness and just your pursuit of God. I know that that's in response to His pursuit of you. But is there anything before we totally wrap up our conversation? Is there anything that kind of stands out as something that you'd like to leave with our audience? Doesn't have to be, but if there's something that pops into your mind.
Just as long as you're breathing, there is hope. And don't ever forget that. As long as you're breathing, there is hope. So don't give up on hope, because Jesus is just right around the next corner. He's right waiting for your next breath. That's what I like to say.
Yeah. Yes. So good. Well, Dennis, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. I'm so grateful again for you, and I'm just grateful you took time out to be a part of this with us.
My pleasure. Anytime, Gary.
Thanks so much. Well, hey, everybody, thank you for joining us also for this episode of the Love and Truth Network podcast. And we look forward to seeing you in a future episode. Take care. Bye-bye. Hey, thanks so much for joining us for the Love and Truth Network podcast. We hope that the stories and insights shared have ignited in you a sense of God's powerful love for you and given you encouragement for your own journey toward relational and sexual wholeness. Remember, transformation is absolutely possible when rooted in grace, truth, and authentic biblical community. Subscribe today, share with a friend, share with your pastor, and we look forward to seeing you in our next Love and Truth Network podcast.